Good day, and welcome to this GIS report. I'm Information Officer Paul Bridgewater, and on this report, we'll be focusing on how the government of the Virgin Islands will be commemorating and celebrating the life of the late Honorable H. Lavity Stoutt with a concert on Sunday, March 2nd, 2025. Mr. Stoutt, who's considered as one of the territory's visionary leaders, will be commemorated and celebrated with a concert under the theme Heroes Live Forever. I also got the opportunity to speak with the Permanent Secretary in the Premier's office, Mrs. Carolyn Stoutt Igwe, in Long Bay. Mrs. Stoutt Igwe is a relative of the late Mr. Stoutt, and she shared some insight on the man that he was and her memories of him while she was growing up. Here she is. All right, good day to the listeners and viewers. We are here with the Permanent Secretary in the Premier's office, Ms. Carolyn Stoutt Igwe, and we're here in the beautiful Long Bay in West End. And we're at the historical site where Mr. H. Lavity Stoutt was born. So P.S. Igwe is going to tell us about the man that she knew and all the fond memories that she has with him. P.S.
All right, good morning. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here in beautiful Long Bay. Long Bay is the birthplace. We're actually standing on the grounds where H. Lavity Stoutt was born. At the back is where the house where his mother's house was. It is currently replaced by a building that is owned by her granddaughter. Actually, one of her granddaughters that she raised is on that property right now. So it's a privilege to be here to talk about him. He was the child of Isaiah and Idalia Stoutt. He was the last boy, but the second to last child. So we are grateful to him for the service that he gave to this territory. But before he gave service to the territory, he gave service to his family. So we are grateful to him. We know that he was among the last of the children, as I said previously, and his nieces and nephews have very fond memories of him, especially those who grew up in the Long Bay area. So we know he was very fond in this area, very fond to the territory, but also very fond to his family. He was very close to his nephew Elmore, and his nieces, Gwendolyn, Carolyn, and some of the others with whom he spent a lot of time around trying to groom them, because he spent a lot of time with his mother, and his mother raised two of her granddaughters, in particular, Gwendolyn and Carolyn. Some of the older ones grew up a little bit around her, but in particular, Gwendolyn and Carolyn, they grew up with her. So with her being there and him being very attentive to his mother, they also have very fond memories of him.
All right, so tell me about the man that H. Lavity Stoutt was. Growing up, what was your experience dealing with him when he was chief minister? I think you were young at the time.
Yes, I was young, but my memories of him would be back in, well, every year on January 1st, religiously every year, we had to make a trip from Ballast Bay to Long Bay to come and look for our grandmother. And in coming to Long Bay, you then had to visit every house. Every uncle's house you had to visit. And when we had to go to H.L. Stout's house, it was a different experience in that, because we knew he was the chief minister for most of that time. You know, you had to be on your best behavior. I think the other houses, or Uncle William, we could have been more relaxed. But when we got to H.L. Stoutt, you basically had to be on your P's and your Q's to make sure you sat correctly, and you just be on your best behavior. But he was very kind. I would say that always welcoming. It was never that you went to his house and he was the chief minister, so he couldn't have a conversation with you. So I think he was very family oriented as far as I can recall. I did have a couple interactions with him in my early years in the public service, but by the time he died, I had gone away to school, so I wasn't here when he died.
I'm very sad that you weren't. But the territory definitely lost a big figure when he passed, and we are now celebrating the 30th year of his passing. So I just want you to tell me anything that you want to add about him.
Well, one of the things I would say, everybody would say that he was a visionary. For many years, he quoted Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. So many people thought that they were his lines, not knowing that they came from the Bible. But, as a local preacher, of course, from time to time, I also remember him, as I should have said, I also remember him preaching in church because I was a Methodist. So I remember him coming to church to preach. And I did hear about his time in the Zion Hill Methodist Church, where he was faithful to his responsibilities when it came to him directing the choir, being a choir master. So I do recall that aspect of his life as well. But in terms of the territory, where there's no vision, the people perish, is what he would always say. And many people would say that he was a visionary. I recall hearing stories of him traveling, and when he would travel, and anything that he saw that he thought was nice, that he thought that the BVI didn't have, he would come back and try to implement to make the BVI a better place. I also recall in the earlier days when they started the celebrations of him, we had persons like Mr. Alberto Robinson, and I would never forget, I think it was the last celebration that Mr. Robinson attended, because he too died somewhat suddenly. And he talked about the fact that, that every year they would be to the poll, and basically that HL had the voters list, and he would check off. He kind of knew those people who were his supporters. And he said by the time the votes were finished counting, he was not very far off in terms of the total number of votes that he would get, because he really knew his people. He loved his people. And he was so confident, from 1957, he was elected, and he remained elected until 1995, never losing an election. And that speaks volumes for him, because it meant that he must have been doing something right. I know that there are some persons in the Caribbean area. He actually spent a lot of time with the elderly, visiting the elderly, speaking to them and engaging them. So he was very fond of his people, and definitely spent a whole lot of time engaging with the people, which is very important as a leader. So even though he was a leader of the territory, you had the whole Virgin Islands behind, responsible for the entire Virgin Islands. He never forgot the people who sent him to the House of Assembly. So he was really a people's person, very engaging. And of course, there were times we would know he was a no-nonsense person as well. Very firm in his beliefs and his actions, and definitely a fighter for the people of the Virgin Islands.
Agreed. So P.S., thank you for sharing your insight upon the man that you knew and the man that the territory has lost. So I want to thank you for letting us, come to your family space and, reminisce on the man that H.L. Stoutt was. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for coming to the lovely Long Bay.
We look forward to seeing you at the concert on Sunday, March 2nd, 2025. Until next time, I've been your host, Information Officer Paul Bridgewater.